Well, I grew up in Berea, which was close to the airport, and the pilots would come a week before the air races, which lasted a week. So for 2 weeks, I was just in seventh heaven as these little guys would come buzzing over the house, and they're sounded like a bunch of hornets.
One of the neighbors worked down there. I was very young. And then he would take the children in the neighborhood, we'd get in his old car and go down there, and we didn't have to pay to get in because he took us where he worked, and it was just fascinating.
The National Air Races. Who can forget the excitement of this annual celebration of speed in the 1930s and 40s? For 1 week every September, we trekked out to the airport and enjoyed the thrills of the world's fastest motorsport. And even when we couldn't afford the price of admission, we still found a way to marvel at the skill and daring of the swashbuckling pilots and their magnificent flying machines.
My mother and Dad would pile us in the car, 3 of us, but we didn't go in. We went to some of the bean fields on Engle Road, and we parked the car there, and then we would watch the air races.
When the stands were built in 1929, they were built to accommodate 100,000 people. However, not everyone had the money to come to the airport and be in the stands. And as the racers went over a large part of the west side of Cleveland, people would park in parks or on streets, and many people would rent out their front yards. They would charge a quarter or 50 cents. They also would sell soda pop and hot dogs. Many people rented their homes to the pilots and some of the other people that came here. I talked to a number of people that told me as a boy I had to sleep under the dining room table because my bedroom was rented out to someone.
But it was so incredibly exciting for a 10-year-old. I mean, you had, the cars were all boxy in those days, so streamlined trains and racing planes, that's where all the action was for a little boy. And it was just marvelous watching these things, and of course the photographs of the pilots, and they, they're suave, and they're out their helmets and all these things, and they're real heroic.
They posed by the plane, and Roscoe Turner had one of these caps, these leather caps that fit there. Remember that? Yeah. And he had this mustache that I swear was painted on. It was like, or oiled or something. It was a great big thing with handlebars on it, but very dashing, very dashing.
But Roscoe was different from most pilots in that he didn't want to be seen as the average barnstorming pilot. Whereas most of them wore their World War I leather flying jackets and just about anything, Roscoe created a uniform for himself. He wore riding breeches, polished boots, a blue tunic, Sam Browning belt, and a cap, and he created his own wings studded with diamonds. So he was well known. The Gilmore Oil Company sponsored him, and he wanted to be even more noticeable, so he purchased this lion cub. Everyone said you couldn't tame a lion cub, but Roscoe in fact did. And he took the lion cub virtually everywhere he went when he was flying for records, including here at the races, and there are many chambermaids that will tell you that they didn't like what the lion did in the hotel rooms. Early on, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals contacted Roscoe and said, Roscoe, you're up there in the air and you have that safety net of a parachute. Now this poor lion's riding in that airplane with you, and we think the lion should have a parachute. So Roscoe said, okay, we'll get the lion a parachute. And as the lion grew, obviously the parachute had to be renewed, and they made, I believe, 3 or 5 of them to suit the size of the lion.
Roscoe Turner worked hard to maintain his glamorous, dashing image, and he worked just as hard on breaking speed records. Turner is the only 3-time winner of the Thompson Trophy race, a race named for Cleveland's Thompson Products Company, which we know today as TRW. Jimmy Doolittle was another star of the Cleveland National Air Races. He was known not for a flamboyant personality, but for flying a very unusual plane called the GB.
It was called the GB because it was built by the Granville brothers. They had this unique idea of the shape of a falling drop of water being aerodynamically pure. It was tested in a wind tunnel. However, the airplane was not easy to fly. It was considered that only 3 men in this country at that time could successfully fly that airplane. Jimmy went on to win the Shell Speed Dash that year. He made quite a name for himself.
The national air races brought thrills and excitement into our lives. And just as important, they were a proving ground for American aviators, many of whom went on to help write a chapter in world history.
And these fellas built these airplanes, and they devised all kinds of things that were eventually used during the war. And many of these men went on to become test pilots and designers and help the war effort. Without the national air races, I seriously doubt if we would have had air supremacy in World War II as early as we did.
It was the biggest thing going in those days as far as aviation went. Yes, it was, and it put Cleveland right at the center of it. And it was great for Cleveland. Great for the country. Great for me. I loved it.